Hello again, dear friends, and welcome back to Emmaus Presents. My name is Vern Steiner, and this is our second study in the book of Psalms. In our first segment, we considered some of the introductory issues important to understanding and appreciating this magnificent book. Today, we're going to focus on Psalm 1, which introduces the Psalter. I hope your Bible is open, and we're ready now to take a closer look. The psalm begins with an introductory exclamation. Blessed is the man who, and then it continues to describe the blessed person. Now, when people are said to be blessed in Psalms, a pronouncement is being made about their enviable status, almost as if to say, lucky them, or now there's a person everyone should want to be like, or that's a way of life everyone should desire above all. And the entire book of Psalms will, in some sense, elucidate what this means. What it looks like to be truly blessed. But here in the opening psalm, blessedness and its polar opposite are marked out in three ways, in three stanzas of 2 verses apiece. First, the two paths, verses 1 and 2. The negative path, what the blessed person does not do, we find in verse 1. Blessed is the man who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked, nor stand in the way of sinners, nor sit in the seat of mockers. Let's consider each of these lines briefly. The blessed person does not walk in the counsel of the wicked, meaning in the mindset of the ungodly, of those who do not fear or submit to God, who think they can live in God's world on their own terms, who have opinions other than God's and who think those opinions matter. Now, the problem with the counsel of the ungodly is not that it can never work or achieve even apparently positive and pleasant ends, but that it lies about its true character and its ultimate outcome, on which our psalm will say more. Moreover, the blessed person does not stand in the way of sinners, that is to say, in the manner of life that follows on from such a mindset, life lived out by their own rules in violation of God's. And further, the blessed person does not sit in the seat of mockers, does not belong, in other words, in the meeting place of those who scoff that any of this should matter, who arrogantly refuse to accept God's instruction. Did you know the triad of descent from walking to standing to sitting? That's the way sin works if we're not on guard. We end up walking in the ways of sin, eventually just taking our stand in the way of sinners, and ultimately taking a seat in the meeting place of mockers. If this is the negative path, what the blessed person does not do, what is the positive path? What does the blessed person do? That's verse 2. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and on his law he meditates day and night. His delight is in the law of the Lord, meaning God's direction, God's instruction on what life is all about and how it is to be lived. His delight is in the law of the Lord. Elsewhere in Psalms, we read about the law of the Lord as being sweeter than honey and more precious than silver and gold. The blessed person meditates on the law of the Lord day and night, meaning all the time this person is engaged. This person's whole being is engaged in deliberate preoccupation with the words and ways of God, so as to see everything God's way and to have all of life shaped accordingly. Now, the path one chooses determines the character or shape or portrait of one's life. And that's what we find in the second stanza, the two portraits, verses 3 and 4. Beginning with the positive portrait, what the blessed person is like, verse 3. He is like a tree planted by streams of water that yields its fruit in its season, and its leaf does not wither. In all that he does, he prospers. Like a tree, what beautiful imagery. Not merely a wild sapling which just springs up anywhere, but deliberately planted as by a master gardener in a place where it can receive the nourishment it needs. No wonder then that in all that he does, he prospers. Of course not, in the sense of health and wealth, as the world might define prosperity, but rather in the sense that God would define prosperity. In all the ways that matter to God, the blessed person will prosper. Those who are not like verse 1, but are like verse 2, enjoy true prosperity in every important sense because they are planted by the streams of God's nourishing word and God's nourishing grace. They have a resource to sustain their lives under any and every circumstance. Then comes the negative portrait, what the blessed person is not like, verse 4. The wicked are not so, but are like chaff which the wind drives away. The contrast is highlighted by wordplay. You can hear the pun if I pronounce it in Hebrew. Like a tree, ka'etz. Like chaff, kamotz. Ka'etz, kamotz. Like a tree, like chaff. The point is this. Chaff is precisely opposite what a tree is. Essentially, chaff is the good-for-nothing hull, the husk of grain that's driven off by the wind after the seed or kernel has been removed. And so the ungodly are pictured unflatteringly here as pathetic lightweights, rootless, fruitless, restless, in constant motion, carried wherever the winds of this world blow, no place to stand securely. Which portrait is apt, by the way, even if in this life they appear to prosper by the world's standards. The sobering fact is that those who are like chaff, because anchored to nothing more than their own opinions of what defines life and meaning, will in the end go the way of chaff. And that brings us to stanza 3, the two prospects, verses 5 and 6. First, the negative prospect. Therefore the wicked will not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the congregation of the righteous. Therefore, after the word therefore, the scribes who transmitted to us the Hebrew Bible put a little vertical line. It's what I call a little scribal speed bump. It slows us down so that we ponder the sobering message that comes right on the other side. The wicked will not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the congregation of the righteous. The verse anticipates the later words of Jesus, who likewise taught about true blessedness in the Beatitudes in the Sermon on the Mount. In which sermon Jesus also spoke about two paths and their opposite prospects. Remember the two gates, the narrower gate and the wider gate, and the two roads, the narrow road and the broad road. And who said of those who choose the wide gate and the broad road, I never knew you. Away from me, you evildoers. Which brings us finally to the positive prospect, and the destinies diverge. Verse 6. For the Lord knows, remember what Jesus said, I never knew you. And now to the righteous and to the way of the righteous. The Lord knows the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked will perish. Perish. What a tragic finish. And here's the point. The path one takes, mapped out in verses 1 and 2, not only determines one's portrait in life, verses 3 and 4, but it also decides the prospect awaiting at the finish, verses 5 and 6. And so it is that Psalm 1 brings each of us to a decision, and in that decision lie the issues of life and death. Every one of us follows one of two paths, fits one of two portraits, and faces one of two prospects. One path, one portrait, one prospect belongs to those who accept God's definition of genuine blessedness. The other to those who refuse and who will have it their own way. So ultimately the question is this: what will we do with the message of the Lord, which, as I've said earlier, always points us to the Son of God, to the Messiah, to the Christ? And that's Psalm 2, by the way. It's striking that Psalm 1 begins with blessed, and Psalm 2, last line, ends with blessed. In Psalm 1, blessedness is attributed to the righteous who walks in the ways of the Lord. In Psalm 2, blessedness is attributed to those who seek refuge in the Messiah, in the Son of God. In the upheavals and uncertainties of life today, no more important question presses upon each of us than the one posed by Psalm 1. Thank you for the privilege of spending these moments together in Emmaus Presents. Until next time, let's be sure to walk carefully in the way of blessedness. God bless you.